today we have the topic on abortion. And abortion, what abortion really is, abortion is the termination of pregnancy before it reaches the fetus reaches its viability. That is 27 weeks of gestational period. So the termination of pregnancy before the fetus can reach its viability, and viability is the process by which the fetus is able to breathe on its own or to live on its own. So what we are going to do in this talk, we are going to start off with the causes of abortions. There are some of the causes of abortions, mostly are not known, but we have the predisposing factors to these causes of abortion. So amongst the causes that are known to cause abortion, the first one on my list will be age. So we're going to talk about age first. Now age, there are women in their 30s, 30s, 35, going above. These women can have abortion, and the reason is simple. The reason is because these women will have a decrease in the production of some hormones, and the degeneration of ovaries will account for the reduction in the production of hormones, and one of the hormones is progesterone. Now, women, before they reach their menopause, the ovaries tend to produce the follicles, the cells in the follicles, they tend to produce the hormones called progesterone, relaxing hormone, and some estrogen as well. So what this hormone does is that the hormone progesterone is going to maintain the endometrium. It's going to maintain the tissues of the endometrium and the uterus, thereby maintaining pregnancy. And estrogen also will develop the endometrium. Relaxing hormone will develop the muscles. It will relax the muscles of the uterus, thereby reducing abortion by not causing the most vigorous contractions of the uterus muscles, the myometrium. It's the relaxing hormone. So due to degeneration of the ovaries as women grow, that is when they start reaching the ages 30s, their 40s, somewhere there, so they can be predisposed to this what we call abortion, because there will be no production of progesterone, and the pregnancy will not be maintained as a result of lack of this hormone, progesterone. Very, very important hormone in the maintenance of pregnancy. And also, relaxing hormone is very important because it will prevent abortion. And the other cause that I'm going to talk about, these are the maternal causes. So it's important to name them as the maternal causes first, because they are divided into maternal causes and the fetal causes. So amongst the maternal causes, so these are the maternal causes. And one as well as that, there's gonna be infection. Now, what is an infection? Well, infection is the invasion of microorganisms in the body tissues. That is what an infection is. So, how does infection lead to abortion? Well, we probably know in the uterus we have the placenta. So when in the blood we have a lot of infection, microorganisms, for example, the viral infections, the viruses, the bacteria, the parasites, all these, when they invade the blood, they will travel through the bloodstream and they will reach the placenta. And when they reach the placenta, they will cause the placenta to start degenerating, and the degeneration of the placenta will cause the placenta to detach from the uterine wall where it was implanted, and this can lead to abortion because the placenta has degenerated, the microorganisms has invaded the placental tissues, and as a result, we are going to have this detachment of the placenta from the uterine wall. As a result, there could be abortion before the end of the gestational period. That is 27 weeks of gestation. Very, very important note to notice. Infection. So in infection, we have viral infections, parasitic infections, and all sorts of bacterial infections. Very important that we note this. The other thing that we are going to talk about is the uterine abnormalities. Now, in uterine abnormalities, so we can talk, for example, we'll talk about the retroversion of the uterus. And the retroversion of the uterus is simply the tilting backwards of the uterus, and that's abnormal because the whole uterus, instead of being straight, it's going to tilt a bit backwards, and then that will cause some of the complications to the developing fetus, and the fetus might not develop well because the uterus has tilted. Instead of being straight where it was supposed to be, but it has tilted backward a bit and causing all the sorts of complications to the growing fetus, of course. And the other thing that we can talk about this the uterine abnormalities, there is what we call the biconate the uterus. Now, in biconate uterus, the uterus appears to be seen like the heart-shaped shape of the heart. So, for example, here we have the normal uterus. This is the normal uterus. And the normal uterus is supposed to have two cavities. But in the biconate uterus, you are going to find the uterus is going to have two cavities as a result of the T-formed shape, like this. Let me draw it a bit so that we can have a clear understanding. So this is the biconate uterus. And the biconate uterus has got two cavities. And this will lead to fetal abnormalities, and the fetus will be disturbed to grow well. So as a result, we might have this abortion. Very, very important, and very, very important note to notice, to take the biconate uterus. We also have the another type of uterus called the conate uterus, uniconate uterus. And in conate uterus, this is the uterus which is very small and appears like something like a U somewhere, and it has only one fallopian tubes. So instead of the uterus having two fallopian tubes. It's gonna cut here, and then the remaining part is what we call the uniconnuate uterus, and also some of these things will lead to abortion because the fetus will be disturbed. It can't grow well. It can't grow well. Instead, we need the normal uterus, and as well as that, there is what we call maternal diseases. So maternal diseases are like hypertension, anemia, malaria, all sorts of stuff, cardiac diseases, renal diseases. They can cause abortion. So how does this come about? So for example, the renal disorders, as we already know that the kidneys, they play a very important role in the regulation of blood pressure in the body, and they produce the hormone called the renin. And the renin is going to circulate around about in the blood, and when it passes through the liver, it's going to be converted. It's going to be joined by an home and the protein in the liver. They call the angiotensinogen. And angiotensinogen, by the action of the renin enzyme, will be converted to angiotensin and angiotensin type 1. Angiotensin type 1 doesn't do anything in the body. It will circulate, and then it will go and pass through the lungs. And when angiotensinogen type 1 passes through the lungs, it's going to be acted upon by an enzyme called the S enzyme. That's the angiotensin converting enzyme. And then it will be converted to angiotensin type 2. Angiotensin type 2 has various effects on the kidneys. One, it's going to cause vasoconstriction. And vasoconstriction will cause increase in blood pressure. So abnormalities to these things can lead to what we call the fetal distress syndrome as a result of lack of increased blood supply towards the placenta. Because there's going to be hypotension. There's going to be a high amount of blood that are needed for the mother in order to supply the fetus with a lot of blood, because in the blood we have nutrients. So abnormalities to these conditions, to these systems, will cause the reduced supply of blood towards the placenta, and that can cause the baby to, the fetus, of course, not to be supplied with a lot of nutrients. And as well as that, amongst the causes, we also are going to have environmental factors. And environmental factors, we can talk about other social factors, for example, smoking, alcohol, caffeine consumption. Because what smoking does is that the nicotine contained in the smoking, in those cigarettes, is going to cause vasoconstriction, and vasoconstriction of the arteries of the peripheral arteries is going to cause reduced blood supply to the fetus, to the placenta, and as a result, the placenta will not have a lot of blood. In the blood, as we know, we have got nutrients, vitamins, and all sorts of micronutrients which are needed for the fetus to grow. But as a result of vasoconstriction, we are going to have a reduction in those nutrients. As a result, we can develop what we call fetal distress syndrome as a result of reduced blood supply to the placenta to go to the fetal heart. And that's the other thing that alcohol does, is that alcohol is going to cause malnutrition, maternal malnutrition, And as a result, maternal malnutrition has got several effects to the baby. The baby also will develop malnutrition. Very, very important to notice. So we've got age, infection, uterine abnormalities, maternal diseases, environmental factors, and the other thing that we are going to mention, we also are going to talk about the other abnormalities of the maternal, for example, uterine. For example, it's also important, before we talk about that, it is also important to talk about the incompetence cervix. Now, under normal circumstances, the cervix is not supposed to dilate before the true labor starts, but you are going to find, as a result of other uterine abnormalities. So, for example, congenital abnormalities over the tissues, the connective tissues of the cervix, causing unwanted dilatation of the cervix, overdue stretching of the cervix. This can lead to abortion, because as the cervix dilates, the fetus is going to descend down, and we can have an abortion. That's the preterm abortion. Preterm, of course, meaning abnormal, premature, so that's a miscarriage. And as well as that, there is what we call polyhydramnios. Uh, Polyhydramnios is simply the excess amniotic fluid. Polyhydramnios. Polyhydramnios is simply excess amniotic fluid. And this is a very dangerous situation, because what polyhydramnios does, the excess fluid, is going to cause what we call intrauterine pressure. And intrauterine pressure, of course, is going to force the fetus, the growing fetus, to go down the cervix. And when that happens, we term it as abortion, because the fetus will descend before it reaches its viability. So it is very important for us to note that. So we have age, we have infection, we have uterine abnormalities, maternal diseases, we have environmental factors and social factors, incompetence. We are also going to have endocrine disorders of the mother. We are still on maternal causes. So endocrine disorders. So we're going to talk about the endocrine disorders. Now, in endocrine disorders, there's going to be a decrease in the production of the hormones. So, for example, also it's important to talk about the maintaining hormone, the progesterone. Progesterone progesterone is very important, because under maternal endocrine disorders, there's going to be poor development of the corpus luteum. And as we know, the corpus luteum is well known for producing progesterone hormone. It is the cells of the corpus luteum, called the luteal cells, that produce a large amount of progesterone in order to maintain the endometrium in the first half of pregnancy. So it is very important that this is there. But if there is maternal disorders, then the corpus luteum will not be able to produce progesterone. As a result, the pregnancy will not be maintained. The other thing to talk about is stress. This plays a very important role in abortion. So when women come to our facilities, the pregnant women, we are indeed responsible not to let these women undergo stress for long periods of time. And the reason is simple. Stress will increase the production of stress hormones, and amongst the stress hormones that we know is adrenaline and cortisol. And what the stress hormone do is that they will cause vasoconstriction of the arteries, and in this case, they will cause vasoconstriction of the arteries going to the placenta. And when they cause vasoconstriction of the arteries going to the placenta, then there's going to be a reduced amount of blood going to the placenta. Then, as a result, the placenta will not be able to supply more blood to the fetus. As a result, the fetus will develop what we call fetal distress syndrome as a result of reduced blood supply, which is reduced oxygen supply. Very, very important that this is noted. And we are done with maternal causes. But under maternal causes, it is also important to talk about multiple pregnancies. Multiple pregnancies predisposes a lot of women to abortion. So we have fetal causes. We are done with maternal causes. Under fetal causes, I'm going to talk about chromosomal abnormalities. And chromosomal abnormalities accounts for at least 50% of abortion. And this will result in poor development of the conceptus. And the conceptus is the developing embryo. So chromosomal abnormalities will account for 50% of abortions, and this results in poor development of the conceptus, being the embryo. In the next talk, we are going to talk about the types of abortion and their management. Because as we know, abortion can either be spontaneous or induced. Spontaneous being involuntary, induced being voluntary. So that is what the next talk is all about.